Should we give it a couple more minutes or start?
Oh, I think it's pretty much 10 after. We should probably just get going.
Okay, all right,
It's a very focused audience, however.
good.
There she is. Hey, T.
Which is good.
So we have made significant strides on the notification process, primarily for our aquaculture program. Yeah, we've, as you both three know, we've had a number of outreach meetings, workshops, if you will, with our aquaculture working group, literally since the spring of last year, and came up with a lot of different recommendations from those participants that we took to heart and made a lot of changes, falling mostly on Ben's shoulders, but the changes are already being implemented, the administrative ones. There's a small handful that we think we're going to have to go through the regulatory changes for, but the notification side was pretty straightforward. We want to make sure we notify as many folks as possible when an aquaculture application comes in the door, to make sure that we have as much input on the review side when we're actually going through that review process. One part of that process is this development that Jennifer and her crew at the university developed for us. And it is a tool where an aquaculturist can put 1,000-foot perimeter around their proposed lease area. And where that 1,000-foot perimeter touches land, anything within that perimeter will generate a list through this program of all the property owners within that 1,000 feet, so that the aquaculturist can then print out that list by plat and lot and go to the town and find an avenue to get a mailing list for all those. So we came to you today to ask, without asking you all to do really much more work, but we understand that when folks need to generate mailing lists for their zoning projects, they can do so through the systems that you already have built in at the municipal level. Is there a way for our aquaculture applicants to take this information that they've developed through this mapping program, walk into the town hall and generate a mailing list, either through the assessor's office or some other tool that you might have? We wanted to ask you about that without asking you to do it. And I think that I want to make that very clear. A number of municipal comments came in that said, hey, we have the ability to generate these addresses and mailing lists. Why not find a way for the aquaculturists to use that process? So without asking you to do it for the aquaculturist, how would it work in your town if someone walked in and said, I've got a list of 50 plat and lots that I need to get addresses for? Is it a fairly easy or straightforward computer process for them to get that information from your towns? That was one of the questions we had.
Well, Jeff, if I may kick in, Tony. I know I should say, but it's Tony. Anyway, that is not an issue. In fact, we just acquired GIS this year. We actually just completed the process. As of December 31st, it's been actually as of January 31st. Yeah, you got it, James. Yes, much needed. It took a little bit of nudging and getting people to think, they thought, well, GIS, it's a way of snooping around into people's properties, especially in Little Compton. You got to keep that in mind, okay? But we've come a long way, and it's on board. So to your point, I don't see an issue at all, and our tax assessor as well as the clerk would certainly make themselves available to the process.
Super. Yeah, Jamie. Yeah.
Same thing here, Director. It's very simple, similar to what we do for zoning applications.
Super, great.
Here in Portsmouth, we have WebGIS, so it is for people who are conversant in that software. It's quite easy, but oftentimes it takes a fair amount of hand-holding. So we will be spending some time doing that, but it'll be a lot less than if we were to spend the time to generate those addresses for the applicant.
Super.
Yeah, so Gary, to your point, is there a way even to reduce the hand-holding factor? For example, is there sort of a public-facing desktop computer that the public might have access to, if somebody walked in with a list of parcels, that they could determine the current owner name and mailing address, so they could provide the notice required under our new notification requirements.
I think so. We have a public facing computer that people coming in for building permit applications can sit down at. So yeah, we could figure out a way to make that available to just get onto the, it's on the town website. So they would be using it to get onto the internet versus, into our permitting system. But yeah, that could be done.
Great.
I think it would still take some, one of us standing over their shoulder, at least to get them going. But yeah.
Well, the fact of the matter is, it's not like building permit applications where an applicant walks in every day.
True, yes.
An aquaculture application in a particular town. I mean, Ben, you know better than anyone, in terms of the frequency of applications coming in the door. Right now, they're few and far between.
Yeah, it's been about, statewide, maybe 5 to 8 applications a year on average. It's going back a couple of years. I guess the only question I have is, we're using parcel data that I guess was able to be incorporated into this tool. And the biggest hurdle here is just verifying that, what the contact information is for those parcels, and in fact, parcels haven't been subdivided or have changed in some manner. I have just looked around and compared some of the GIS portals that towns have with the property lines on our siting tool, and there are some small discrepancies here and there, but that's something that we have this PD process in place, and we want to make sure we capture all the right information. If something needs to be is caught later on, there's an opportunity to correct it, I think, before application gets any too far. I was gonna demo the map tool for you guys if that's something you wanted to see. I don't know if you got to see that at our last meeting, or if people would be seeing this for the first time. I do apologize. I had to reboot my computer, and it looks like I'm back online now, so I can jump off and hop back on my computer and share screen if people want to see the kind of product I can produce that an applicant might bring to the town hall.
I think it would be worth the 5 or so minutes, Ben, to do that.
All right, I'm going to jump off now. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. So again, it's you all are familiar with GIS, so I don't think this will be that difficult to lift. But it was a great tool that Jennifer and her crew were able to build for us to help an aquaculturist. One of the other things we've learned over the course of this effort was that the type of information that we receive in an aquaculture application has historically been, shall I say, mom and pop. There have been various levels of information that comes in large, very high detail, and others that are literally drawn on your kitchen table. So we recognize that the type of information that comes into these applications needs to not only be better quality and for understanding purposes, but also more consistent and have some conformity to them. So we're working on that in our application package to ensure that the applicant submits information comprehensively, of course, but also that it's in a consistent fashion that folks can understand. Because in many cases, people who are looking at an aquaculture application are looking at an activity they don't know much about. So if the information that's contained in that application is hard to understand, it's going to generate a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, a lot of issues. So we're addressing that as well. So I think you'll find that what we have done on the administrative side is going to result in an application package that is far more complete, far more comprehensive, and, well, I won't say easily understood just because of the nature of the activity. It's better understood than it has been in the past. So trying to build some time for Ben to come back online, but those are some of the big changes that you'll see. I can get into a little detail while we're still waiting for him. Within that 1,000 feet, we're being very clear as to what an aquaculturist has to look for and include in their application. So you will see a consistent pattern of how close are you to the nearest CRMC designated right of way? What other public properties are within that 1,000-foot radius? Are they DEM properties? Are there state town properties? Is it an Audubon or a Nature Conservancy property? Those types of pieces of information are going to be important in a review. We're also making the aquaculturists look at what's happening with the natural resources and the physical resources in and around that proposed area. So you take that 1,000-foot perimeter and you identify the universe of activities that are occurring there, and you put that into your application. So there's some uniformity there that we're trying to get across. There's a lot of consistency that we're trying to get across and make it just as easy for our staff to review as well as the general public. So those are the things that we learned over the past couple months that were lacking in a process that we thought was fairly well comprehensive, but obviously there was room for improvement, so we wanted to make it.
Yeah, and just to add, in terms of the tool itself, and this is the reason why it'll be important for the aquaculture applicant to come into the town hall and get the mailing addresses as well as the property owner names to be able to provide that notification. But also it's helpful for the town just to double check, because what happened is with this tool, Chris Damon at the Environmental Data Center was able to bring in the parcel data. And as Chris is always famous to say, once you import that data, it's immediately out of date. Teresa's smiling because she knows. Because what could happen, say 6 months from now, or even sooner, one of those parcels in that 1,000-foot radius may be subdivided, and then there's a new owner who wouldn't necessarily be notified because of use of parcel data, which is now obsolete. So to the extent that there's no changes to parcel boundaries and owners, from the time the applicant prints out the properties within the 1,000-foot radius, we're in good shape. But in the event that there is a change in a parcel boundary, this is where the local knowledge comes in to identify, oh, by the way, we just did a subdivision last month. The new owner is X, and here's their mailing address. That's where the local knowledge is going to be extremely valuable in the process.
I just sent a link of that for this mapping tool in the chat, which Ben is going to review with you all. And also, I believe all of you were at the February 7th meeting where CRMC, Jeff, and Ben went over the administrative changes. But if you missed that and you need more detail, I put the SAMP website link there, and just go to the recording, and we'll have summary notes up pretty soon as well if you just want to scan those. Or please reach out, obviously. We do talk and interact with people. So we just don't send people to websites all the time.
Perfect timing.
And he has, Abby, he has permission to
Yes, to share. Yep.
share. Okay.
Yep. So Ben, we were just wrapping up a lot of the administrative changes we made, so it's a good time for you to showcase the tool.
All righty, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I had to click through a million updates. So it's going to be, so this tool is found on the CRC Narragansett Bay SAMP website, along with other past recordings from meetings. And this is the tool called the Aquaculture Lease Screening Tool. And let me just share my screen here.
Yeah. And Ben, while you were coming on, Jen shared the link to that tool with
Oh, good.
everyone.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
in the chat, so.
Great. All right, so you can see the map here?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this map by default shows all the existing aquaculture leases in the states outlined in the blue color. You can see this box here that pops up, landowner notification. This is the kind of interface where you would be able to draw a proposed lease and see this boundary. And you can either do it by freehand drawing it in the program with your cursor, or you can actually upload a shape file, which would be some coordinates you've already determined. So to demonstrate this, so we can go just pick an area that has some aquaculture. Again, this is for demonstration purposes only. Let's try something here. So I select my draw, and let's say someone wanted to propose something in this area. It's hypothetical for demonstration purposes. And so there you can see I've created a box, and I've created a 1,000-foot buffer around that box, and that is measured not from the center of the polygon, but as you can see from the perimeter, from the boundary line. So it's not a perfect circle; it's a little lumpy, but that is everything that it would be within 1,000 feet of any portion of that lease. Now, I click on this button here that says "What's close," and I have two options: adjacent parcels and the existing leaseholders, which would be the other aquaculturists in the area. And as you can see, there's 28 parcels here in that one other aquaculture lease in the area. And as you can see, this indicates that about 108 acres are encompassed in the buffer circle here. So if I click on my adjacent parcels, I'm given a list of parcel ID. If I want to know where one of these parcels actually is on the map, I can click on it and it will highlight it. And if I upload this list, I can actually create let's save this. Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's upload. I want to print the list as a report. And you can see here the property list of adjacent parcels. And you can see there's no real address information here. We just have the parcel ID numbers. Some of the town data set we have would actually have an address maybe associated also with that parcel ID. It's not always complete information amongst the towns, but at the very least, we get a parcel ID. And you can also see here the nearby leaseholder. So this list is essentially what a applicant might walk into the town with and say, I need to know the mailing addresses for these 28 parcels. When it comes to the existing leaseholder, we also provide them with notice of the application, just like the property owners. But of course, CRMC has that information. So the town obviously doesn't need to fill in that bit of info. But for the adjacent parcels listed here, we would want corresponding contact information, mailing address. And CRMC would send that notice of a PD meeting to the list of properties there. So that's kind of how it works. You can see it also generates a map, which we might want to tweak that a little bit. But this is still this tool is available. It's running. It will hopefully be incorporated maybe into another citing tool that we have under development called Shellfast, or it may end up being a standalone type of tool. But as of right now, it's usable. And of course, it does require that the applicant verify the information with the town. But I think that's really the extent of the involvement of the town for this part of the review process. And if I go back, I can.
Ben,
Yeah.
before you go forward, when you created that area, okay, when you created the box there, does that automatically generate that circle on its own?
Yep. Yeah. So if I wanted to make a, just for demonstration's sake, go somewhere else, maybe over here, it's pretty high
Let's
density.
go to Bristol. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
But, sorry, go here, landowner, go back to my tool, draw another box. So let's make a really long box. Different kind of shape, right? So not really a square, but a long skinny rectangle. And you can see that buffer
Okay.
is
Got it.
likewise, it's just measured from every point on the outside of that.
Yeah, so Tony, the purpose of having this tool is it takes out the subjectivity of it, right? And so,
Awesome.
you know, once you either upload a shapefile which has predetermined coordinates that you might have measured out in the field, or as Ben just demonstrated, you know, you draw it where your proposed lease is, the tool automatically establishes the 1,000-foot buffer around the perimeter of that polygon. So there's no adjustment of that unless there's a change in the actual proposed lease area. You know, if the applicant decided, well, I'm going to make it a smaller area, then obviously there would be fewer properties, but the tool automatically generates that 1,000-foot. So there's no other input other than the size of the lease that would determine that 1,000-foot radius. It'll always be a 1,000-foot radius around the lease.
Yep.
For generating a list of properties and other aquaculture projects that would be within that 1,000-foot radius to be notified of an application moving forward through the process.
Awesome.
And I'd also note that, you know, the basis for this 1,000-foot is well, what I've kind of envisioned it as is a contiguous area to the proposal. And our regulations require that the applicant provide information necessary for the council to determine the compatibility of the proposal with the existing uses of the area, of the contiguous area, that is. And the contiguous area is not defined in our regulations, but I think for purposes of these applications, 1,000 feet minimum is probably a good net to cast. And we're also looking for other necessary information on top of property owners and leaseholders, such as rights of way within that 1,000-foot area, or any other shoreline that might provide public access or is used significantly for recreation, things like that. It's really kind of like a dragnet. You know, we're you know, you're picking your area, your site, and then we're creating an area around it. And bare minimum, we're looking at everything that's going on within that area. And of course, we have guidelines for some of our deer sighting, which I'm not sure while I was gone if we talked about too much, but those guidelines, you know, would be, you know, this contiguous area allows us to look at the proposal in reference to the guidelines to kind of efficiently see if it meets the guidelines or not. You know, for instance, one of our guidelines is you should be 400 feet minimum away from a public right of way. Of course, you may capture a right of way in that contiguous 1,000-foot area that's 600, 800, even 900, 1,000 feet away. We know where it is in relation to the proposal now. We know the distances. We've looked at that as part of the review. Yes, it does meet the guidelines, but that doesn't mean, you know, we're not going to fully explore any potential impact there. I think it's just a kind of a bare minimum, you know, snapshot of the area, and anything happening within that 1,000 feet at minimum is what we're going to consider. We can consider things that are happening outside that 1,000-foot range as well. But this is, I think, a good way to approach application review, particularly in our enhanced public notification process. It would give the public also an idea of where this site is and how the applicant at least envisions its compatibility.
Can I jump in with a question? Typically in does this activity carried on by the applicant as part of the preliminary determination request form?
Yes.
The applicant would submit those addresses as part of that form. And then when CRMC establishes a date for the preliminary determination meeting, they would send out these notifications. Is that right?
So one of the things we've come up with we discussed in the last meeting is we're going to have a 30-day minimum period between the announcement of a preliminary determination meeting and the actual date of that meeting. And that announcement of the meeting would include notice to those landowners listed and any aquaculturists listed, as well as to the town as we traditionally do now. Also, it would be published on our aquaculture listserv, which has a fairly broad reach across a lot of different stakeholder groups.
Yeah.
And so this is really, the aquaculture listserv really shouldn't be kind of undervalued here. It really is probably one of our best tools on getting notification to various stakeholders. We had to define some distance that we would include for property owners. And of course, there could be someone who's nowhere near that 1,000-foot range that uses that area every day as part of the recreational or commercial activity, whatever it is. So we do really, want to make sure that we have good attendance at these PD meetings, that all the various stakeholders that might be interested have an opportunity to come and hear firsthand about the proposal from the applicant, and also get that feedback from the stakeholders to the applicant and to CRMC. So yes, this will be part of our PD. The notification to the property owners would follow through to a full 30-day public notice as a follow-up application to the PD meeting. And I believe we also would include that notification to the same group again when a public hearing is scheduled.
That's correct.
So that would be notice of a public hearing where a decision might be made by the council.
Yeah, I'll reiterate that. And the normal course of our notification process for any application is that in any part of the review process that requires the public to be notified, that same original list will be notified, and then any additions to it over time.
I think this is a really good idea. Typically in the past, what's happened is that we receive a letter that establishes a date for a PD meeting, and it typically goes on to the town council agenda as correspondence, and they meet every 2 weeks. And so I don't think it's really caused a lot of problems, but this really expands just because of the way the dates fall in place, that I think that this is a good idea that expands the notification.
So Gary, can I ask specifically, is 30 days the right amount of time?
I think so, yes, particularly if these abutters within the 1,000 feet are going to be notified separately. I think that that's probably fine.
Good.
I had until I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but until my town council got used to the idea of seeing these things. I have had town councilors want to, typically if something is in correspondence, if the council wants to discuss it, they would put it on the agenda for the next meeting. And I had town councilors bring it forward, so it's an agenda item at the next meeting. And I had town councilors thinking that they had some regulatory decision making to be done about this, and we had to sort of disabuse them of that idea. this is really CRMC's deal. So there hasn't been, apart from me hosting the PD meetings and representing the town, there hasn't been any real activity apart from people who are, abutters, apart from the really very interested parties. So it's
Super.
good. This will be a good thing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think was something we found surprising in this process was that even the industry itself really had no issue with the notification enhancement. I think a lot of them felt that, someone that might be nearby an application will find out about that application one way or the other. And it is probably beneficial for everybody that occurs early on in the process. So that was one of the comments we took to heart, and that really came from all sides of the issue. So yeah, well, we have yet to put this into actually implementation. I mean, it does. I should say it is ready to be used by the next applicant that comes through the door. That person has not come through yet, but when he does, we'll see how this works out. But from the feedback from you all today, it sounds like it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I anticipate that I will probably have to help coordinate the first couple of these until everybody's gets a feel for it. But I thank you for your time and cooperation.
Yeah.
Actually, I think you simplify the process much more than where it used to be, I mean, I've dealt with some of the folks in Bristol, in the council day and as a former administrator, and now here in Little Compton, I haven't had to deal with anyone thus far, but you just listening to you, the process is much more simplified.
Well, I think, Tony, that we have a higher confidence level, particularly with the aquaculture listserv and this tool to determine appropriate notification to property owners within the 1,000-foot radius, that those people who should find out about aquaculture projects moving forward are likely going to be notified.
Yes, I agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. And as Ben pointed out, when we met a couple of weeks back as a larger group, other than Alaska, we have one of the largest notification requirements for aquaculture projects in the country.
Yeah.
Maine has 1,000-foot notification. It's slightly different because it's based on mean low water. Is that right, Ben?
No, it's 1,000 feet, but they only go to the riparian property. So
Correct.
They wouldn't go to the property behind that
Right.
property. It essentially, the notification ends at the water line, and they are a low tide state. So yeah, private property begins at mean low.
Right.
Texas has a 1,000-foot notification range as well. Another notably big state. Everything's bigger in Texas. But again, they only go to the riparian owner. Even Alaska, which has, I think, 2.5 miles, is it, Andrew? Or is it half a mile?
I think
Yeah.
you said
Half
half a mile.
Half
Yeah.
a mile, yeah, half a mile. They also only go to the riparian owner. Of course, you might have to go half a mile in Alaska to even find a neighbor or a person. Right? So, we, by incorporating or including the upland properties within a certain radius, we have one of the most inclusive notification ranges of any state. And when you consider that the only other state that goes further distance-wise is Alaska, the biggest state in the country, and we're Little Rhodey, the littlest. I think we can rest assured that this is a very inclusive, standard for us. At first we had started with 500 feet, and that was, based on, what a lot of other states do, honestly. So there's about 28 coastal states that have aquaculture programs in the country, and about 14 of those have a notification requirement. many of them don't have any pre-application requirement like a preliminary determination. And Rhode Island has actually been held out by agencies like NOAA as really being in the lead when it comes to aquaculture applications in our process, because we have this PD preliminary determination process. However, I think, you look at these other states incorporating notification ranges. That is a more recent kind of development, and I think it only makes sense for Rhode Island to stay on par with what other states are doing, considering historically we've been a leader. So hopefully this will smooth things out a little bit for future applicants. It will. I appreciate your Tony, your comment, Tony, that this is a simplified version. Maybe for the public, for the applicant, it will be more complicated than they're used to. But that's maybe not a bad thing. We want the applicants to put more, as much time, effort, and research as possible into the early phase of the application to
Correct.
ensure a smoother second phase of the application, which is the formal 30-day public notice and decision making.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the preliminary determination process, it's effectively a process to hopefully weed out really bad choices early on in the process, so that you don't continue to have a bad choice going all the way up to the council.
Yeah, and to fully explore any alternatives that might
Correct.
address or lessen concerns. A lot of times, if there have been instances, certainly where things get very contentious and emotional, but there have also been instances where applicants in the community have come together, and sometimes that's through the assistance of a mediator, like a USDA offers a mediation service for farmers in Rhode Island through the DEM Division of Agriculture, and that is something aquaculturists can avail themselves of, that service. And if the community is willing to participate in that, it can be helpful, very helpful in just reducing conflicts, either real or perceived. A lot of times, education is good on both sides of this. The applicant needs to learn about the community and what their concerns are. And I think the community sometimes really need to understand what the aquaculturist is looking to do and how that might actually affect them or not. A lot of times there is a certain educational component, particularly for a first-time applicant in an area that may have not seen aquaculture recently or at all.
So Ben go ahead, Jeff, please.
No, it was me, as in
Oh,
walking
there.
into a buzzsaw. You have a simple aquaculturist wanting to start up a business and oftentimes walks right into a buzzsaw of opposition. So this is good. The more effort that they put into it, the more they learn about what they're perhaps up against. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that, but it is also the applicant's burden to meet the requirements of the program.
Sure.
And I think these extra steps or requirements, particularly in the early phase, will help him do that. It will really help get the right information also to not only staff but to the council and the decision makers, and also to the public. It will help, I think, allow them to track things. One of the other things we are working on, I should just note, still in the mix, but is some kind of aquaculture specific database. We have on our website, so like a public database that people can use. We do have a permit database on our website right now, but it's all applications, right? So you wouldn't just be able to single out the aquaculture ones. So we are trying to develop that so we can post essentially the same information we're sending out on the listserv in one place on our website, so people can see, oh, these are the upcoming PD meetings, or these are the applications that are currently pending, something like that, and just to increase the transparency and allow folks to track an application through the entire process, even if they hadn't been there from the beginning. So.
Jeff, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to wrap up based on what I was hearing.
Great.
We tried to explain what we're attempting to date, and just from this basic feedback these last few minutes, we very much appreciate that you've taken a look at that and understand what we were trying to do, and also very much appreciate that it seems to be not only an easier process, but the right thing to do. So thank you for you on your side of the equation by having an applicant come into the town hall and being able to use your GIS systems or whatever computer systems you have to help generate that mailing list for the applicant that will ultimately get back to you in terms of notification. So we didn't want to put any undue and additional work at the municipal level. And I think just from today's discussion, we found out that that won't happen. So thank you all very much for that. That was it. I think we covered everything that we wanted to talk to you all about. And again, this feedback was great for me to hear, quite frankly. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Jennifer, anything?
No, that's great. Thank you everyone for joining us. And this will be recorded. This is recorded, so we will be putting this on the website as well as some summary notes. If you'd like to share it with your colleagues, that's
Great.
fine too.
Super.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.